So today, you guys, we are going to learn about a guy named John D. Rockefeller, one of the titans of industry back in the Gilded Age. And as I'm reading this, I want you to keep several things in mind for me. Number one, do you think that John D. Rockefeller was a robber baron, meaning someone who did illegal and criminal things in order to make a lot of money? Or was he a captain of industry, somebody who did a lot for our world and really kept the people in mind? This is what John D. Rockefeller looked like right here. And as I'm reading, I do ask you to please follow along with me. In 1858, a small-time prospector named Edwin Drink sank a hole 70 feet into the ground near Tutsville, Pennsylvania. Black slime soon filled the hole. The slime was oil. When the news got out, people raced for the hills and gullies of western Pennsylvania. Before long, that state was wild and hurly-burly place, something like California in the gold rush a decade earlier. Trees came down and derricks went up. Oil wells caught fire and black, smelly fumes filled the air. Railroads pushed in. Towns sprouted like dandelions and disappeared just as fast. Pit Hole, Pennsylvania, which was well named, had a hotel that cost $65,000. When the prospectors left, the hotel sold for only $50. One day, a quiet, unflapping young bookkeeper was sent to this disorganized area to see what was going on. Is this oil business worth investing in? His employers had sent him to find out. No, he told them, and then went to invest in it himself and to become one of the most successful businessmen the world has ever known. His name was John Davison Rockefeller. Rockefeller's Scottish Baptist mother had raised him to be orderly, hard-working, and exact. Once he and his brothers went skating on a frozen river. They were not supposed to do that, but they saved the life of a boy who fell through the ice. When their mother heard what they had done, she praised them for their courage and whipped them for their disobedience. The boys were encouraged to work. John raised turkeys and saved $50. When a neighbor asked to borrow $50, he lent the money and charged $3.50 interest just to borrow the money. It was a lesson he never forgot. Money could be made to earn money. That is what capitalism is all about. Some say John D. Rockefeller was the greatest capitalist who ever lived. Others say he almost destroyed capitalism for everyone else in America. One thing is certain, he soon brought order to that disorderly oil business, but not by being a prospector. He could see that the money to be made was in oil refining. In 1863, he was 24. He had a partner, and they bought a small refinery. With his efficient methods, it quickly grew very large. Rockefeller began buying his competitors. If you have oil to sell, there are two costs that are important. The cost of the oil and the cost of transportation. I mean, you need to get the oil to the buyers. Because there were competing railroads and because he had quite a bit of oil to ship, Rockefeller made the railroads give him special prices to ship his oil. Actually, what he did was to pay the full price like everyone else. Then he got the railroads to give him back half of what he had paid. He did it secretly. It was called a rebate or a kickback, and it isn't fair. It meant he could charge less for oil than his competitors did. Soon he put most of them out of business. Within 10 years, he controlled the nation's oil industry. The oil business was very lucrative, which means that there were big profits to be made. Rockefeller's company, Standard Oil, became spectacularly rich, which seems amazing to us today, is that all of this happened before internal combustion engine. That means before the car. The internal combustion engine empowers automobiles and other machines that made oil so important during the 20th century and even today. The oil that brought hundreds of millions of dollars to Rockefeller was used mostly to light kerosene lamps. In those days, electricity still did not exist. The more you read about John D. Rockefeller, or history in general, the more you will see how hard it is to make judgments. Good and bad have a way of getting mixed together. You can decide for yourself what to think of him. Again, do you think he was a robber baron, someone who did things criminally, or was he a captain of industry, someone who did amazing things for our world, our economy, and the country? In the 19th century, many people thought Rockefeller was one of the great villains of all time. His bookkeeper's mind seemed interested only in money and profits, not in people. When he put others out of business, it didn't bother him at all, as long as it made profits for Standard Oil. The company was called the greatest, wisest, and meanest monopoly known to history. Rockefeller soon had vast interests in many businesses, not just oil, and the less he paid his workers, the more efficient the businesses seemed. When some miners tried to form unions, he shut the mines and actually let workers starve rather than pay fair wages. His strike-breaking troops shot and killed workers and their families in mining towns in Colorado. Rockefeller claimed he didn't know what was going on, but he did. After the turn of the century, laws were passed that helped prevent unfair business practices, but until that happened, tycoons like Rockefeller sometimes behaved as if they were kings. Again, these laws, you guys, that were put into place to protect workers, this was what was called the Sherman Antitrust Act, something you should have learned the other day in class. John D. Rockefeller had a quiet, dignified manner, but his company acted like a big tough bully, beating up anyone who tried to fight it. But as I said, making judgments is difficult. Because it was so well organized and managed, Standard Oil helped make American business grow into the world leadership, and it made life better for most people by bringing products to the market at a low price. There were two sides to Rockefeller, and they were both right beside his bed. That was where he kept his safe, filled with money. But on top of that safe was a Bible. The Bible and his mother's teachings made him generous. He gave away vast sums of his money to help others. He didn't have to do that. Many of the business barons of his day kept all they earned for themselves. Rockefeller and Carnegie were different. Each took the intelligence and the efficiency that had made him rich and used it to distribute enormous sums of money. Rockefeller lived until 1937. He was 98 when he died. For the last 40 years of his life, he spent much of his time giving away his money. While Carnegie gave away 90% of his fortune, Rockefeller, always orderly and precise, gave away exactly half of his. Still, it was an immense half $500 million, and it created the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, and a foundation just to give money to worthwhile causes. If you look at a couple of these political cartoons that were created about John D. Rockefeller, this one says here, "Praise John, from whom oil blessings flow. Praise him, all oil creatures here below." It was a jokey design for a memorial by the University of Chicago to its founder. And then here, this was actually done by the city of Chicago, the Chicago Tribune. And it says, "This Chicago Tribune cartoon reacted favorably to all the money that Rockefeller gave away. It's not surprisingly, since one of the institutions he founded was the University of Chicago. But some people thought it was wrong to accept money that they felt had been gained by hurting other businesses and workers." So now what you're going to do is you're going to go back into Schoology and you are going to complete this graphic organizer here. What I want you to do is I'm going to go through each section of this with you to explain it so you fully understand it. Now again, this is all about John D. Rockefeller. I want you to tell me about his background. Tell me about how he was raised. What lessons did he learn at a very young age that made him the great titan of industry or the great entrepreneur that he became? For character traits, you are going to come up with several words that you would use to describe John D. Rockefeller. Again, when you do this, think about both sides of John D. Rockefeller, not just one side. His money. How did he go about making it? Not only from the time as a little boy, but how did he make his money when he became extremely wealthy? Again, you are focusing on the young John D. Rockefeller and the lessons that he learned, and the older John D. Rockefeller and the greatness that became of him. How did he go about earning his money in every aspect of his life? His money. How did he use it? Again, there are two different sides to John D. Rockefeller. And there is the good side and there's the bad side. And there are two very specific ways that he went about using his money throughout his life. And now this last one is called my epitaph. An epitaph is what someone would write on your tombstone. For example, we always hear that great example of when a family pet dies, and it might be a dog, and on the tombstone it would say, "Here lies man's best friend." You're going to think of a phrase, a very simple phrase that would sum up John D. Rockefeller from the beginning of his life to the end of his life. What short phrase would you use to sum up John D. Rockefeller? When you are done with this, please make sure that you submit it back into Schoology. Best of luck.